Welcome everybody to the Pedal.ly Jam session, where we talk with gear innovators and musicians about what's happening and what they're doing to make waves in the music industry. I'm Ryan Parker.
And I'm Brian Murphy.
And together we're the guys at Pedal.ly. Today on the Jam session, we're welcoming Cody Fields, the President of Westminster Effects. Okay, Cody, so here's the ground rules for the Jam session.
Oh, man.
We have you for about an hour.
Yep.
And we love to talk about gear and music, but no topics are taboo on the show. So if it strays away from music, not a problem. So let's get rocking. So, Cody, first off, give us the history of Westminster. I want to know how you came up with the name. I want to kind of get the feel for like what was this whole thing you started?
Yeah. So, well, we do have an hour, so it might take me. So how do I even start this? It's a ridiculous story. I was working for an advertising agency here in the upstate of South Carolina in 2014. I was newly married, and in early 2015, it turned extremely toxic. The very long story made very, very short is I called out the owner on a very bad decision. Reasonably so, right? Like I wasn't, railing against her. I just took her aside and said, hey, we got people concerned about this, and she took it super personally. So it turned toxic, and I quit that nonsense and went freelance with what I was doing with the advertising agency, being blog writing, social media management, that kind of thing. And took that freelance a little bit, and while I was waiting for some stuff to materialize, I got a kit for a blues breaker from General Guitar Gadgets. And it was like, that's fun. And I got ideas. That's literally how I started the company. I don't recommend that approach to anyone. Is you need to build more than one pedal before you decide to start exploring starting a company.
Because it's a pretty big jump going from advertising into circuit design.
Right. Exactly. And that's one of the fun things about the pedal world is you actually have very few proper electrical engineers and whatnot. So it's mostly DIY guys who just kept watching YouTube. and really that's the same thing with most with so many guitar builders and amp builders and stuff like that, is we just went to YouTube University.
I mean, that's the modern way into a career. It's just watching YouTube.
Yeah.
Is it kind of funny, because isn't there a meme that's floating around in the guitar community that you start out as a collector, start a guitar shop, and then you become a pedal builder? Isn't that kind of like
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to argue. And so a couple years into that, my father-in-law generously invested, and I acquired a company called Nose Pedal. That was a little bit of a resurrection project, and eventually I subsumed that product line into the Westminster brand. And now the most recent happening that we'll get into in more detail, I assume later, is the 2716 Seth Morrison signature distortion, which we released in June. Seth is the lead guitarist of Skillet, and so that's been huge for a small brand like mine. So you also asked about the name Westminster Effects. Well, anybody who delves into my product line will see very quickly that everything is church history themed. One, because I'm a nerd. And so part of my advertising shtick at the beginning was marketing to church and worship players and saying, hey, you can read some better books. Start with the Bible. And oh, by the way, read Edwards or Spurgeon or Knox or Calvin. And I picked Westminster after the Westminster Confession of Faith, being a Reformed guy myself, but I'm not Presbyterian, and I do get some grief from Presbyterians for that, but I tell them Westminster rolls off the tongue a lot better than 1689 Second London Baptist Effects. So, you got to pick your battles there.
Yeah, no, it's a cool name. I like it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you alluded to actually a question I was going to ask you, Cody, which is, what would you attribute to the success of your business? And then what would you tell someone that's getting into the pedal design business what not to do? Like, what are some of the hurdles that you would say, hey, look, man, if you're looking at starting to build pedals and, you've been the hobbyist and now you're getting into it, don't do this, right?
Yeah.
And what would you attribute to your success? Because like getting Seth Morrison in and getting that 2716, which has been one of our best sellers since we've launched it, is awesome. Here. So there had to be some connection there that kind of made that work out for you with Seth. So expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. So in terms of how I made the thing work, it's a lot of grind. So one thing to tell, potential pedal builders not to do is don't expect the thing to blow up overnight. Businesses extremely rarely ever blow up in a week or a month or a year. And so this is 7 years in the making at this point of actually being public with this company. So it's been a grind. It's been always upping the quality control, if that makes sense, of, everybody kind of starts out, how do I make them look good? And then it's, well, I guess I can spray paint it. And then I guess I can put a water slide decal on there. And there's nothing wrong with those in and of themselves, but there comes a point where you got to make a jump to your art and your aesthetic actually being somewhat durable. And so I several years ago made the jump to powder coating, and I do all of that myself.
Oh, wow.
And for a long time, I was actually UV printing for myself, but my printer died, and I was like, I'm sinking too much time into this. So now I've contracted that out. That's the only thing that's not done in house at this point. So it's just keep raising the bar for yourself, and keep upping the quality control game. And so go ahead.
Is that what you would say is separates you from other boutique pedal builders, is the quality? I mean, besides your pedals have awesome tone, right? And a lot of them have a really cool aesthetic of being kind of tongue in cheek, which is really cool. But
I wouldn't know a thing about sarcasm.
I almost imagine, Cody, you need to end like everything with snark off, like every post, because and there are definitely times when I'll write a blog on my personal blog and I'll come up with a little phrase and I'll just kind of chuckle to myself and say, man, that was a good one. Just because I can't help myself sometimes. But there has been the increasing quality and the I guess what you really have to separate is I don't really look at it so much as like my friend Rick Matthews at Matthews Effects. Like, he's out there killing it, fantastic pedals, but I don't really compare myself to him or someone like JHS, Wampler, Walrus, whatever. In that regard, I would more so compare myself to the guys who they post stuff for 3 months and then all of a sudden you never hear from them again. Or maybe the guys that have been embroiled in scandals of taking people's money and never delivering product, stuff like that. Is, well, what were the issues that sunk them and how can I avoid that? Right. It's be honest with people, respond to emails, even though I hate doing it. It's the worst part of the job is answering, messages. And especially if somebody has a particularly, not very well thought out question, we'll put it that way. Because that happens. Right. And you have to deal with it. But be honest with people, be communicative with people, and actually deliver the product, right? Even if it legitimately takes a while, like with the 2716s, I had a shipping delay because my printer went down. And if somebody asked me, it was my bad, give me like 2 weeks. Taking accountability is an important part of this business. And it's funny, Cody, because we find that everybody tries to roll the accountability downstream to somebody else. And they never, that's with us even. Our whole thing is, we're trying to elevate, since we're not making a product, we're trying just to elevate the experience all the time. And your customer service, man, has been amazing. So kudos to you, because
we've been doing business long enough to where we've run into a couple customer service things, and you've been right on top of it, like so fast. It's just kind of blown me away, where I thought I'd send it in and then, hope for a response, but not with you. We got the answer right away. And you even jumped ahead of us and said, hey, if you want to connect me direct with the customer, I'll handle it. And that was awesome for us.
Yeah, good. Yeah. And, in the more famous or infamous way of looking at it, I think of guys like Mike Fuller. I don't know if you deal full tone, so you don't have to say anything. But he has a reputation, right?
Yeah.
Of being overly snarky or abusive or belligerent with anything customer service related. And so when I see the hit that his reputation takes whenever that happens, I'm like, man, let me just try and avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, I think there's a real fine line of having fun and being snarky and sarcastic, but when it comes time for business and taking care of the customer and switching that off and saying, hey, this is a business issue, you had that balance and really took care of us. So
the difference between the messaging and the actual face-to-face interactions.
Right. Yeah. So who's your biggest business influence?
Oh man, business influence. That's a good question. I guess when you when I roll it all back, when I first started, I was really fascinated with both how Walrus and JHS did things, right? Because you had JHS even back then, you kind of had the campy, we're not taking ourselves too seriously kind of thing. And by the way, yes, they sound good, right? And then you had Walrus with a little bit edgier of an aesthetic. They weren't, every now and then on social media, they'll post something sarcastic or whatever, because you kind of have to. But those were kind of the two that I took a lot of influence from. And it was, can I combine these?
Marry them up.
And not take myself too seriously, have some fun, throw some punches every now and then, and then make the pedal look awesome, right? And I struggled with that for a while, but JHS, I mean, they do look cool, but it's the little icon. It's not my thing, right? Whereas Walrus with their aesthetic, like,
oh man, splashy graphics on everything.
You know what you're looking at as soon as you see it.
Yeah.
And so that was my influence there.
So that brings me to this guy. We need to talk about the Chick-fil-A because it's the thing, Cody. I got to hear about this because advertising background meets pedal graphics meets probably interesting conversation with Chick-fil-A's legal
it absolutely
team.
has. Let me grab a couple pedals really quick and I'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah, and for anyone who's doesn't follow Westminster, this is a great delay pedal.
So
and he's on a new version. As of about a week ago, it's a new version.
Yeah. So this one doesn't have any guts. I just threw the foot switch in it. But this is the new version. The lawsuit proof version.
So Cody, should I be selling this to a customer or should I be keeping
you're
this?
Good. You're good.
Okay. All right.
So it's
well, no,
not.
I'm wondering if it's gonna should I keep it as a collectible because I like keeping one-off things. I'm one of those guys. That's how I found my wife.
Well,
Actually,
played.
She likes one-off things because I'm an oddball. So I think she found me and was like,
right.
All right.
Well, it's not nearly as on the nose as the very original version.
Yeah, the original. Yeah.
And so that was my first conversation with them, where I got an email from their intellectual property lawyer, and he said, "Hey, I'm not going to use his name, but Chick-fil-A's intellectual property lawyer with this law firm, and could you give me a call? We'll keep things cordial and whatever. My clients have some concerns." And so very technically, my lawyer says I'm covered under satire law, but when it comes down to the battle of resources, if it came down to that,
you're going to lose.
I'm going to lose. But there were here's what I'll say about how Chick-fil-A handled it is they issued 0 threats. It was
awesome.
We have this concern. Would you mind changing it? And if you have a bunch of stock, we'll even consider buying that out. And I said, well, I don't even remember how many enclosures I had at the time that weren't stuffed. It was 3 or 4 of the original. And I was like, can I just sell those off? And he was like, yeah, we can we can do that.
Yeah.
He said, look, man, I deal with everything from mom bloggers who make I Heart Chick-fil-A bibs to, scammers printing out fake coupons and selling them, stuff like that. So, I changed it to the cow, the one that you just held up.
Yep.
And had that one for 3 years, and actually put out a podcast episode with the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast. My co-host in Nebraska actually recorded his side live from his local Chick-fil-A because that's just how we do things. And a week later, if you see the that above my shoulder, that's the letter I got from one of their executives thanking me for my cooperation, and it had coupons for free food. So
that's awesome.
And so what was it, about 2 months ago, that lawyer hit me up again. He was like, so we do have a trademark on that cow.
After a couple of years of research, we found that the cow has a trademark on it.
Yeah. And I was like, would you mind sending me that documentation just for posterity's sake? And he's like, yeah, I can do that. And so, and lo and behold, they, with the U.S. trademark office, here's the cows and whatever breed that is. I can't remember. It starts with an H, but it escapes me. And so I was like, okay, fine. And he's like, look, we're not going to file a trademark infringement against you. He's like, we're not going to do that. He's like, we prefer to make friends if we can help it. So that's how the chicken came about. And I'm happy with it.
At least you didn't call it the Eat More Meat pedal, Cody.
Yeah, especially with another brand.
Or Eat More Chicken or whatever.
Yeah.
Was it Eat More Chicken? Yeah, Eat More Chicken pedal. Yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So you've also had some issues with Joel Osteen, from what I understand. You have an Osteen distortion pedal, man. That's pretty in your face. Every time I show someone that pedal, and I show them like the headings above like the knobs and everything.
Oh yeah. It's always been a hit.
People love it, man. Because I mean, everyone's got a joke about Osteen because the guy's got like a mega yacht sailing through Florida while it's like flooded and stuff.
Right.
He's like baptizing people while on his yacht while people are,
The main thing that I regret about naming it the Osteen distortion is now everybody wants me to name some kind of pedal after another prosperity preacher.
Oh,
it's like, oh man, now you need like,
wait, who's the guy that always is like, I deserve a jet. My jet's the one that I need.
It's either Benny Hinn or Jesse Duplantis.
Okay. I don't follow
it's one of those guys.
I watch on your Doxology podcast, you talk about them every once in a while, and I watch on the Facebook page, you'll pop up a good meme about those guys. It's
like, oh, you need the Benny Hinn helicopter tremolo or what, because the sling is jacked around his head.
We need an envelope pedal with a freaking airplane on it that is like, it's called the I Deserve a Plane, model or something.
Yeah, or like the Kenneth Copeland compressor or the Furtick flanger or whatever. Like I get them like at least once a month. So that's my biggest regret, but he does know about it. He does know about it. His
he probably has one on his pedal board.
Right. His former music director actually confronted me about it at Summer NAMM, 3-4 years ago. And
really?
he was not happy. He was really gracious. I'll give him credit for that, but he was not happy with it. And then did
you send him one for his board?
No, I should have.
You have all that Strymon stuff on your worship board. It's time to put Westminster on.
I do have his number. So you talk about degrees of separation. That's one fewer degree of separation to Joel Osteen that I have, and now that you have.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing was, he so I did the Stomp Box exhibit at Summer NAMM or whatever it was in 2021, when there was that really sparsely populated Summer NAMM in Nashville.
Oh yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it?
It was so small. Well, it was my first NAMM. So you hear NAMM being a massive show.
And you're like,
I
what?
had some friends in Nashville, so I was out there kind of dual purposing the show.
Yeah.
But I was there right when it opened on Friday and walked the floor and said, well, maybe they're not set up yet.
Or it's like
Because
how
I saw the show within about 2 hours. I kind of met the people off my list who I wanted to meet. Like, the native audio guys were super cool, and
oh yeah, Mike's awesome. I love Mike.
So it was nice actually getting to talk to people and just get to know them a little bit too. But walking the floor, there wasn't a lot of people. And the thing was, this was middle of the pandemic. So even a lot of the people who were there didn't have stock to bring on dealers and things like that. So we were kind of hitting it from both sides of both a smaller show and just the whole industry supply chain issues at the same time, when they're saying, well, just come talk to me, send a contact form off my website. Well, I could have done that without coming here, right? Yeah, seriously. Yeah. And even like with, I don't know if you remember Peavy's booth, but it was literally a table with a bowl full of stickers on it. And it's just like, man. Yeah, with no one manning the booth.
With no one there. Like, what are we doing?
There were
guys?
A lot of booths set up where it looked like the rep didn't show. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then Gibson's pulling people off site away from the show. And that's interesting too. And
whereas like this is the benefit of being a smaller company instead of this massive corporate conglomerate or something like that, is I was able to very quickly pivot if I needed to. I only really ran into like one or two supply chain issues. Like with a chip for my tap tremolo and some JFETs, and that was it. And especially like not needing, the enormous quantity that someone like Boss, just for example, would need to fulfill orders. So I actually benefited from the pandemic because I was over here like, hey, I'm okay. I can get you deliver stuff next week. But to pull that full circle, so Osteen's, and again, I think it's his former music director. He's walking down the Delicious Audio Stompbox exhibit, just
and it's easy to find you because there's no one at this NAMM, right?
Right,
there he is. That's him.
And he's it's pedalboard, and then he realizes too late that it was me. And he looks up and sees me, and you just kind of see this oh crap look on his face, and he's like, I might as well try stuff. So he puts on the headphones and he actually tried out the Osteen distortion.
You should have gotten a photo
and liked it. I should have. I'm disappointed in myself, but I was just so floored that it was actually happening that I just brain farted is all.
That's awesome. So have they sent you anything? I mean,
no.
I can imagine that guy's got to probably be more protective of his brand than even Chick-fil-A is.
Yeah, but I think they understand if they try to say anything, I will be their worst PR nightmare for like the next 3 months.
That's awesome.
And especially like the satire law, like I would absolutely win that case if it actually went to trial. And like
we'd have to chase down every meme maker on Facebook that makes fun of him,
Yeah, exactly. And if I can't do that, then nobody can have any kind of satire or parody anyway.
The Babylon Bee basically owns Joel Osteen from that standpoint, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
The Babylon Bee has something like every couple of weeks on that guy. It's kind of funny.
And they should keep that up. I'm all for it.
So moving forward, do you think you'll stay with these kind of direct parody type pedals, or are you gonna broaden it out a little bit?
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing is the parody pedals, it's really just two of them. Right? It's just the Osteen distortion and the Chik-Del-A because we have to celebrate the Lord's chicken if we're a Christian company. Well, of course. Everything else is actually really straightforward. Stuff like the Piper Drive with me throwing out a shout out to John Piper for his book Desiring God, and that shifted my theology and stuff like that. Or with Luther, then there's still some tongue-in-cheek stuff because Luther nailing the 95 Theses on the castle church door in Wittenberg, and of course the tap tempo button is underneath a hammer. So there's still the tongue-in-cheek stuff, but most of it's actually like really celebratory of hey, we've got 2,000 years of family history. Let's see what it is, because most American Christians treat church history as the Book of Acts, and then a bunch of Roman Catholics, and then Billy Graham.
Yeah.
Is really how they see it, and it's so much better than that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm throwing at people at the moment, is like, look at these guys, this is amazing, you know.
So with your audience, with such a heavy Christian theology base in your business, do you find that people actually buy a pedal and do some research and start trying to understand the meaning behind the pedal if they're not a Christian? Like, what have you seen? Like, how do people react to it as they start to understand the historical context of what you're doing?
Yeah, and and I think you get this. It depends on who it is, right?
Yeah.
You got some people who just don't care. It looks good, it sounds good. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm good. There are some people who find out about it and then they become hostile. Which is, you know, I'm not holding it against them or anything, but I will reserve the right to be snarky back to them. And then you do have people who, you know, maybe they still don't believe or anything like that, but they'll, you know, well, who was this John Chrysostom guy that you're talking about, you know, back in the 200s, or Augustine or whatever. And they actually do end up, you know, kind of appreciating you did your research. And this is a deep cut.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, not everything is, you know, very top of the barrel. Like, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel sometimes to, you know, really dig something up.
Yeah, I personally had to look a couple of those up.
Oh yeah,
I know that's the foundation of these, but I don't know the story behind it. So,
and that's the goal. And that's the goal, is so then you know the story of some, like, I need to do something about with Polycarp or something like that, because that guy's story is just incredible. But you know, it's now, you know, the story behind Augustine or John Chrysostom or Spurgeon or whoever. So, you know, I do get a lot of that. And, you know, sometimes I even get pushback from some of the worship crowd where it's, you know, why do you care so much about theology? Well, one, who's God? And then they answer the question, okay, you're doing theology. So
right.
It all ties in together.
And you can't separate any Christianity, any Bible study from theology to begin with.
Exactly.
If you don't know theology, you don't know the roots to the path, to know the path, to walk the path, to get to the end of the path, right?
Yeah. And you know, we can talk about loving God all we want, but if you don't know God, then you can't love him. Right. I use the analogy all the time, and my wife is probably sick of me using it. But she's 5'9", and she dyes her hair like this bright red color. And if I start saying, man, I love my wife so much, and somebody says, tell me about your wife, and I say, man, she is 5'2", blonde hair and blue eyes, and somebody actually knows Kristen, they're going to say, you have no idea who you're talking about, do you? And the answer would be yes. You know, so that's kind of the goal here, is get deeper, get richer, and actually know what you're talking about sometimes, to be a little snarky about it. Yeah.
It's interesting. I like the fact that you take your faith and you're willing to put it into your business, because a lot of entrepreneurs aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to stand on the mountain that they really represent and fight for that mountain tooth and nail with what their business represents as well. Okay. So with that being said, if it can't be God or Jesus, who would you want in the trench with you if you could only pick one person to go to battle with you to achieve the goals in your life?
Oh, man.
Obviously, we know Kristen's got to be one of them, right?
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, she's there, but let's even take her out of the mix. Let's take a direct family member. Who's the person to you that, like, you know, is going to stand by your side thick and thin? I'm just curious. I always like to find out, you know, influence.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. My really anybody in my immediate family has always been super supportive. Both my parents, and they're still around. They're still together. My sister, who's 2 years younger, and you know, like we're willing to, you know, there's how do I say it? We're willing to call each other out, but it's never been a super tense thing. Right. And it doesn't hurt that my dad is an elder at my church.
Yeah.
as of what, 6 months ago or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, when and my wife and I lead a small group Bible study. So if something comes up, I'm running it by him, I'm running it by our pastor and whatever. And so, I'm kind of blessed in that regard, be like, oh, hey, I have a pretty immediate support group, like right here, So my immediate family has always been pretty legit. If I got to go through, something like church history, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is the story of Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley's martyrdom, if you've ever heard that story. So they were martyred in England in the 1500s by Bloody Mary. So they were Protestant, she was Catholic, and that was, before the days of separation of church and state, which I won't even get into that. but regardless, they were martyred, they were burned at the stake.
Oh, geez.
And
I thought that was only reserved for witches in Salem.
No, and that's an interesting story that gets misrepresented anyway. But Ridley starts freaking out, like he's tied to the stake, he's about to get burned, and Latimer said, "Play the man, Master Ridley, for today, by God's grace, we will light a candle that will never be put out." It's like, give me somebody like that who will tell me something like that in the trenches. They're setting you on fire, but it's really just a candle, and it's going to further things. Like the ancient saying, I can't remember who said it first, but the blood of the martyrs being the seed of the church. And that's another celebration of Westminster Effects is, not all of these guys had it squeaky clean. John Calvin was run out of Geneva when he was pastoring there, before they said, "Hey, can you come back? We really screwed this up." So he gets back in the pulpit, doesn't chastise him or anything. His first sermon was just picking up exactly where he left off in the next verse.
And it's crazy because you look at even just going back to the apostles, they were all broken men, right? We're all broken. And the whole thing is it's how are we willing to allow ourselves to be used for God's purpose to actually accomplish what his goals are, not our own. And that gets lost a lot, I think, in Christianity. And, for me, I've always lived kind of the kind of slogan that, do the right thing, whether people are watching or not, just because
absolutely.
For me, it's about my relationship with God, and that's a personal thing. But for me, I want people to see how I can be the best influence I can. And I always tell people I'm just as broken as everybody else, and I'm just a work in progress as well. And it's just funny how people are like, "Oh, I thought all Christians were supposed to be these perfect people." And I'm like, nah, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
I think there's that band. Is it called Bad Christian? That's the Christian band. And
it was Emery who has the podcast, Bad Christian. Yeah.
Bad Christian. And I was where they talk about like, hey, no one is, 100% dialed in, right? You may think you are, but you're not,
Right. Yeah. And they, that's actually, I think, a sad story where, they started out with such good intentions and now they're, effectively denying the faith at this point. And
but you got a lot of that over the last 4 or 5 years, Cody. I mean, you've had a lot of Christians come out and be like, "Hey, you know what? We're out of here." And I don't know. It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder how hard they're really willing to fight that battle. Are they willing to be the candle to be lit? Right?
No, absolutely. I mean, you have, I think it's James or First John. I always confuse the two, but they went out from us to show that they were never of us in the first place. Right. And it's, but we understand biblically, he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. Salvation is God's work top to bottom. Jonathan Edwards said the only thing you contribute to it is the sin that made it necessary.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And so, it's one of those things where, we hope and pray that, these bands that have fallen off the wagon, so to speak, whether it's Emery, Under Oath, Reliant K, etc., we want them to come back, and if they did, awesome. You don't have to get into that industry machine, that chewed you up and spit you out. But what we want is for you to be healthy and in a good church with good elders that are actually going to point you to Jesus and what he did.
And it's interesting because like I'm sure that's how your connection with Seth worked out, was both you being Christians. Tell us about how that relationship came about, and then how did that evolve to the 2716, and how did that all come about?
Yeah. So I have a friend by the name of Dwayne Atkinson who runs a podcast called The Bar Podcast for Biblical and Reformed. And he just has guys on who are, maybe pastors, teachers. So he's had on guys like Albert Mohler, Mark Dever, and so on. And he had John Cooper, the bassist and frontman of Skillet, on. And Cooper has been, kind of the voice talking about what we just talked about with, Christian musicians just bailing on the faith and stuff like that. And I texted Dwayne and said, dude, that was a fantastic episode. And I wasn't trying to get anything out of him. I was just like, that was incredible. That interview was great. And he said, thanks. No, I can't give you his number. And then he followed that up with, but I'll send him your link. And so John sent the link to Corey, his wife, and Seth hit me up on Instagram. And from there, we just became friends.
That's cool.
And I sent him some pedals, and we're both enormous sports fans. So that's a lot. Like he's from Ohio. He's from Ohio. He's a huge Ohio State fan and a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. Whereas I'm a big Atlanta Braves fan, and for college football, I'm a big Clemson fan. So we've had some fun recently, with in the college football playoff and all that kind of thing. And it even got to the point where Seth had a connection on the Braves, where he's friends with Stephen Vogt, who was their backup catcher last year. Of course, during the Braves World Series year, mind you. Yeah. And so he hit up Stephen Vogt, and he hooked us up with tickets to a Braves Reds game last year, and we got to go on the field and stuff awesome. Like that. So that was a really fun experience. And I may have geeked out more about being on the field at Truist Park than I did about actually meeting Seth for the first time, but don't tell him that.
So tell us a little bit about the development of the pedal. Did you have a lot of prototypes going into that?
Yes.
How close were you, say, kind of first, second revision to where it is with the final production version?
Yeah. So what I did, the goal with the pedal was, how can we capture his live tone, which is usually a combination of like a Revision F Mesa Boogie dual rectifier and something along the lines of like a Rev generator or a PRS Archon, being pushed by some kind of boost or overdrive in front, whether that's something like a Tube Screamer, or he has used my 1689 more recently, stuff like that. And so he wanted to replicate that in a $150 pedal, so anybody can get it and not
that's a tall order, man.
Exactly. Challenge accepted. But at the same time, the motivation's really cool, where he wants the 15, 16-year-olds who listen to Skillet get inspired to start playing guitar. And I've gotten emails along those lines of, Seth is the reason I started playing guitar, and I'm so excited to get this pedal, and stuff like that. So what I did first was, all right, let me get the concept. And so I just got a kit online, threw it together, and said, ballpark. All right. What do you think about this? And he's like, all right, I like this, and all right, cool. That gives me something to work with. Right. Yeah. And so from there, we really went into actually developing, and he would say, okay, I want tighter bass, more gain, less gain, more volume, less volume, stuff like that. And I think I sent him 4 prototypes altogether before we landed on the one. Yeah. different values here and there while keeping the same skeleton, stuff like that. And I'm really, really happy with where we ended up.
Oh man, sounds awesome. You've been posting a lot of guys demoing it on Instagram and stuff like that. All great players that just make that pedal shine. Everybody that's bought one from us, they just comment to us on just how awesome it is, and they're stoked to get it on their board. So that's
for sure.
That's good stuff. What do you see happening with the music business over the next couple of years? I mean, we're seeing a lot of stuff with all the DI boxes coming out and the helixes and stuff like that. You think that's going to overtake the amp world, or do you think that we're still going to have that purist amplifier guy, the DI guy, what do you think is going to happen there? Because that's been a thing we've been kind of kicking around in our heads, as to like, what direction is the industry headed?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to think about, because when the Helix came out several years ago, everybody was like, oh, everybody's just never going to play an amp again. Right. But that obviously didn't happen. Yeah. So there's going to be some kind of blend, I think. Even with like the band Intervals, they were going completely ampless with I think it was the Quad Cortex for a while. No amps on stage at all, but then the first 2 or 3 rows can't hear anything.
Well, I didn't think about that.
Well, that sucks. So then they ended up at least running, powered monitors or something like that.
In the front of the house?
Yeah. So you can get something on the stage. So there's different applications for different genres, right? Where I'm not going to lug a Marshall JVM to play church. Like a 412 stack, you're normally going to run something direct, or you're going to run an isolated, an ISO cab, so they can control everything, because you're not trying to blow people away in church. And if you are, you might want to tone it down a little bit. But
dude, I hate to say it, I went to a church about 2 years ago, and when the music director came out, or whatever they call them, with sunglasses on while on stage, I was like, all right, we've jumped the shark with music ministry. I'm like, his jeans were more blinged out than Shakira. I was like, what is going on here? I'm like, this isn't like Boys to Men or one of the boy bands. I'm like, and it was just funny, because he was like, had the whole like fedora, sunglasses, jeans. He probably even had that Ed Hardy shirt on. I'm sure he probably had an Ed Hardy shirt on. Maybe it was under the shirt with the big cross on the back of it. But that's kind of my thing, is that's not supposed to be a performance, right? Yeah, exactly.
You're leading people in worship, and so that's one application, right? And so there are certain pieces of gear that generally work better for that, and I think that's where the direct thing works really, really well. Which is the reason that I developed the Geneva amp sim and the Augsburg Deluxe amp sim. Is I got these church guys that need to run direct. Let's give them a good analog option. So the way my friend Brian Nutter of Nutter Guitars puts it is, they can still play with electrons instead of binary code. And so I think that gives a little more organic feel. But I will give credit where it's due. The digital world is really, really good now. But it's not for everybody. But if you're playing,
there's really cool hybrid approaches now too, with 2 notes, where you can run your pedal board, your amp, and then not have a loud amp. You run it into your 2 notes and have that as your direct in too. So you kind of get the best of both worlds there, where you have your finely crafted pedal solution and a great amp sound, and then it goes to the board, and your sound engineers just blown away.
He's loving you.
It's like no more miking, no more loud stages, and so on.
Yeah, and that's actually what my personal band does. My wife and I are in a little post-hardcore band, and we run, like, we have our own portable in-ear rig and whatnot. So obviously we got to be able to hear ourselves. So what we're doing is I run an EVH 5153 50 watt on the clean channel, because I got to use the 2716 in front, of course. Why wouldn't I? But then it's also one cable in and one cable out, that kind of thing. But we're both running with our amps a 2 notes torpedo captor right? Because that simulates a Marshall with V30s. That's what we want anyway.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to worry about some half-drunk sound guy fumbling around with an SM57, can't find the cone or whatever.
Right.
We know exactly what it's going to sound like every single time. And so that's another example of the hybrid approach, like with the two notes that you just mentioned, is and so I think it's just like everything, there's always going to be a little give and take, right? Like when the Line 6 pod came out, the one that was shaped like a kidney bean, people said the exact same thing.
Yeah, back then. I remember it. And then it went to a rack unit, and then everyone's like, oh, even better. Now I can rack this thing, right?
Yeah. And then
now we see what rack units are nowadays, right?
Right. Yeah. And then you had Digitech come along with more powerful stuff, and then everybody kind of, some people at least were like, oh yeah, this is amazing. And other people were like, no, this is awful. And then it's just going to be the same thing over and over again. So it really just comes down to tolerances for certain trade-offs, right? Because the economic principle of trade-off, like there's always going to be a trade-off. I'll get the feel of the tubes, but I might throw out my back. Or I get the convenience of plugging in directly, but I don't get necessarily the same warmth as the tubes. While at the same time, the crowd probably doesn't know a difference.
Know the difference. Yeah.
So you talked about your personal pedal board a little bit. You talked about the front end, your drive. You talked about what it's going to on the back end, your amp and the two notes. Mm-hmm. What else is on there? And especially a guy like you who has access to everything.
And you can make anything you want. So it's like,
So, I'll just go through the pedal chain if you want. So everything is being controlled by a Boss ES8. I really like playing with MIDI and presets and stuff like that. I don't like expression stuff necessarily, but I do enjoy being able to just cue things up and completely change my sound. Like with our hardcore band, we'll go from a chug to like a Strymon cloud reverb, within 3 seconds of each other. So the first thing in my chain is actually the Digitech drop. And I got that for church because our church is, we're pretty committed to you not having to do a Michael Jackson impression in order to sing. We want the auto mechanic with no musical background to at least be able to keep up a little bit. So we'll play things lower than the normal tuning a lot of times. And I don't want to have to change guitars, change tunings and all that. And it's just like, all right, let me drop it a step or whatever, just with a pedal. And that's been a lifesaver, just a sanity saver for me. And then second in the chain is what I consider to be the best noise gate in the world. And that's the Fortin Zool. So I have it modded. So instead of just having the key input, I actually have the key input with a buffered split. And so I don't have to run the split in front. I have the split right there. So then that runs into my Calvin compressor and Zwingli SDD 3K preamp as my always ons. Compression to just even things out. I'm kind of a hack. And then the SDD for, and that's taking the preamp section of the Korg SDD 3000, sticking into the pedal. And that gives me just a little bit more girth, a little more everything, honestly. And so then I actually picked this up from my friend Sean Pierce Johnson from the Stompbox Saturday channel. I run my first channel as the Chrysostom chorus vibrato. So I'm running chorus before everything else.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's been really fun to play around with. You get a totally different sound, and I ended up liking it better when I use it with any kind of drive. So obviously
do you think it just sparkles up the drive to kind of cut through the bass? Is that kind of what you like about it?
A little bit, yeah. It's just there's more effect on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then it's Edwards overdrive in the second channel. So the Blues Breaker-ish, Morning Glory-ish, Prince of Tone-ish kind of thing going on. And then in the third channel, I have at least right now, subject to change. The 1689 and the Physician are both in channel 3. Okay. So stackable options and that kind of thing. Channel 4 is our buddy Joel with the Osteen distortion. So I kind of switch between that and the 2716, depending on how I'm feeling that day. Channel 5 is the 2716 paired with the Augustine clean boost before it. So I'm using the clean boost, which is basically the TC Electronic integrated preamp. So which is what a lot of high gain guys have used, most notably Meshuggah. So I'm hitting the 2716 with that. So running the 2716 a little bit lower gain than I normally would and tightening it even more. Wow. Because I'm insane, I guess. And then channel 6 is actually the Boss MD200, because even though I play in church and I play harder genres, I also like flanger too much. Flange and phase and univibe. And then 7 and 8, it's the Strymon Timeline, Strymon Big Sky. Just personally, I like having a preset for everything.
Gotta have a Strymon on a worship board.
Exactly.
You have to have those.
But also on a hardcore board, right? So like I don't like to mess with tap tempo, and I like it to be exact for that song. It's just a preference. Even though, yes, I do have the Chik-Del-A and the Spurgeon reverb and stuff like that, I like to be able to, on the fly, this is what I'm doing. The Spurgeon and the Chik-Del-A are for guys who don't need that option, and that's totally cool.
Yeah, because it's a big step up into those pedals, but they're great at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where, like, you can absolutely play an entire worship set or rock set or whatever with, whether it's a Chick-Del-A or an MXR carbon copy or like an old Boss DD3 or something like that. Like, there's no shame in any of that. It's just personal preference. And then that goes into a Geneva amp sim that I keep on the board as either depending on my situation, like a backup or running direct, because it also has the buffered split going out, the buffered output, and that kind of helps push things along, obviously, into the amp if I'm running an amp that day. So it's a lot. It's
I was going to say that's a pretty big chain of command there,
because I can.
And we love guys like that, just because, right? Just because.
I won't
when you're talking about taking a small rig to the gig, that doesn't sound like a small rig.
Right. No, I'm working on a mini board for if we play a dive bar with the band, where the stage is like 12 feet wide, and we're a 5-piece. It's just pedals.
Cody's here. Back it up. Beep, beep, beep.
All right.
Well,
you have no idea.
All those pedals in a linear 12-foot.
You have no idea which
Cody.
You're stepping into so many inside jokes that you don't even know about that I'm gonna have to send to friends, and they'll just chuckle at that.
So, is your band with your wife, is that like an actual band out on Spotify where people can find you?
Yeah, so the stuff on Spotify is really, really old. So like, fair warning. So we're called Igniting the Sky. It's basically that 2009, 2010 era post-hardcore. Our old singer, who's on there now, we're working on material basically with me and two other guys splitting vocal duties. So it's almost like the hardcore version of Blink-182 with Mark and Tom splitting everything. But just fair warning, he doesn't sound like me. He's way higher. We actually got a comment on YouTube once where it was just the song, just the music file with no picture of anything. Is like, it sounded great until the girl started singing. So we had to drop tune significantly to make up for our.
You hit him with the drop pedal, boom. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you don't sound like Shania Twain anymore.
So many jokes I'm just gonna pass right over right now.
So,
but
what music have you been listening to? Like, what's like influencing you nowadays, music wise?
The newest Phineas album has been fantastic. The newest Becoming the Archetype album, Children of the Great Extinction, is just mind blowing. Where they're, I don't know if y'all are familiar with them at all, but they had actually disbanded like 10 years ago, but they're a Christian death metal band. And they get after it. Like one of their albums in 2012 was called I Am, and it's an entire concept album on the doctrine of God.
It's like Queensryche for God.
Yeah.
It's like Operation Mindcrime.
Yeah. And so I've been really crushing those two recently. And that's pretty much what's been influencing me recently. Back in the day, and still listen to a ton of A Day to Remember. It's Christian. The guy. Well, yes, I have been listening to a decent amount of Skillet these days, and I'm kind of biased. I
listened to Skillet back in the day when I was listening to Red. I always liked that band, Red.
Oh yeah.
They were tight, and they just had it musically. They just were awesome.
Yeah. And so, go check out Skillet's new album, Dominion.
The new album's great. So
it's a lot of fun, and I'm particularly biased toward Dominion because I got a sneak peek at the solo when they were still recording it. Seth was like, "You have to hear this," and like go look up on YouTube Seth's playthrough of his parts from Dominion. That solo
we'll do is we'll link
nasty.
it below in the description when we post it on you.
Yeah. So definitely go look that up. And here's my bona fides for being a mid 2000s emo kid. Is my favorite album of all time is 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance. So I'll go paint my fingernails black now, and I'll see y'all later.
Well, when we get Seth on and we do this again, you better have some eyeliner on, the fingernails, and some kind of mesh somewhere on your body, Cody. Because
I never went that far. I never did that.
All right.
I did have a lip ring for a long time.
You can keep your man card for a little while longer.
Yeah. I did have a lip ring for about 10 years because I'm resistant to change. And when I took it out, my wife actually shed a couple tears because she had never known me without one. No, she was devastated. She still, we still have. So connected to the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast, we have the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast lounge on Facebook where we talk pedals, podcasts, theology, whatever. And there is a hashtag in there of bring back the lip ring that I get bombarded with all the time. And my response is always simply, no, I'm not bringing it back.
Go ahead, Brian.
No. So the podcast is a great way to find you. Your Instagram is awesome. And if someone just searches Westminster Effects, they'll find you, right?
Yeah. WestminsterEffects.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, if you must. I did it basically as I have to at this point, right? But YouTube, and then if you want to hear me, my pastor, and a confessional Lutheran in Nebraska bloviate on all things theological, you can find us on whatever podcast catcher.
Okay, cool. So before we cut out, give us a sneak peek on what's coming next for Westminster. Like, give us some kind of tidbit so we have something to hold on to, because I know the 2716 just came out not too long ago, but you got to have something rattling around in the cage up there.
Oh, of course, always. When is this coming out? Just for reference.
Probably in about a week to week and a half.
In about a week. I can justify this.
Okay.
So, all right. So, and this hasn't even been
He's
drilled
assembling
out.
one right here live for us.
Yeah, here it is.
Let me get the soldering iron. But I actually haven't even drilled out the top of this enclosure. So we're doing Wittenberg bass preamp version 2 very soon.
Oh, awesome.
I don't have a specific release date on that, but I mean, you see you've got the switchable mid-range 3-band EQ and switchable between active and passive. And of course it'll have a DI.
Cool.
An active DI built in. We're also doing Piper Drive version 3.
Okay, cool.
And how do I put this? If you are obsessive or compulsive about your drive tones, this would be a very good option.
Awesome. We'll have to put those on our must order list as they start to roll out. We'll definitely pick some of those up for the shop.
Yeah. So with certain entities exiting the scene and that entity's used things going for way too much, I was like, yeah, I'll still make that available and people won't have to shell out an entire kidney or something for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, very
It'll be a
cool.
good
We
time.
appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cody, man. It's been an awesome interview. Thanks for hanging with us. And yeah, well, we're looking forward to more things, coming from Westminster, and
absolutely.
any way we can support you, let us know, whether it be connections or anything. And we're here. And, and if you're watching this, video cast, if you have any questions, post down in the comments and we'll make sure Cody gets them and he can answer them and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So,
And thanks for having me on. Thanks for being a dealer. And I'm assuming I will see y'all in Anaheim in April.
yeah,
And,
he might be heading there. I might not, but I think this guy's going to be.
Yeah. I'll be there for sure.
So
Yeah. Either way, 1 out of 2 ain't bad. So.
you get the better looking one of the
Right.
two. Well, have an awesome day, Cody. Great talking with you, man.
All right.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.